If you want to be fully up to date on all the black ship stories, head over to vox9.io right now to listen. After Patreon, it's the most up-to-date platform for the black ship stories, as well as other greats like The Human from a Dungeon, Billy Bob Space Trucker, and so many more. Now back to the story.
Well done, Wyatt. If you discern anything else, no matter how trivial, contact me without hesitation. Good hunting. You may engage the enemy at your discretion. Go now, Wolfhound. Let your fury be deployed. Wyatt felt the corners of his lips curling upwards slightly once those wonderful words reached his ears. With so many targets, it was hard to pinpoint where to attack. The third group was the most tempting option, as he was certain the commander would attack it first while assaulting targets of opportunity in the fourth group. The Kastan's fighters were slowly falling one by one, overwhelmed by otherwise subpar attack craft. In a desperate attempt to retain a measure of genuine ground, most fighters had opted to remain within the protective bubble their ships provided. That won't turn things in their favor. They're only buying time until they are all killed. They're going to sell their lives as dearly as possible. They know there won't be any living past any surrendering to pirates. Esket won't let anyone claim blue bloods to ransom over, Wyatt thought as his eyes focused on his tactical display with a dangerous edge. Now the question remained, who and where to attack first. They couldn't focus on the pirates' small craft on equal terms. Attacking Yazid Kastan's formation were nearly 2,000 of them, and 2,000 more attacking the second formation. 104 fighters could do a lot of damage, but a frontal assault wouldn't be enough. Not immediately, and they needed to punch hard and fast. The problem would be the pirates' retaliation and the confusion the Kastan commanding officers were going to experience after joining the battle. There was a high probability that they would fire upon them, regardless, in the midst of chaos, appearing in their sensors as unknown contacts. His options were limited, and his window of action was closing rapidly. "Everyone on me," he ordered to every pilot as he increased acceleration. "What are our targets, sir?" Gregor asked a moment later. "I haven't decided yet," Wyatt replied through the composter's channel, narrowing his eyes as he continued to analyze the tactical display in search of the best way to join the battle. Two new signatures came to life from the Noir Navio's position, revealing what they were: torpedoes. "It seems Commander Redford is aiming for a full-on offensive," Nultar offered in a serious tone. "The pirates are going to see them soon. Maybe he's trying to give them a scare?" "That's going to surprise them, at least," Leopold agreed. "Look, another two are launching. Definitely going to make them nervous." "Will it be enough to stop them from pummeling the traitor ships to oblivion?" Raquel asked, anger palpable in her voice. Wyatt hummed deeply as the advance continued. 4 more torpedoes were launched in the span of a minute, every volley heading to different targets. As he witnessed the deployment of missiles in preparation for another Staplian assault, he received a data package detailing the commander's plan. Nultar was right. He was preparing for a head-on assault, but without compromising his position as he'd done against the Drazan. Against those monsters, no other option remained. But here, their main enemy was preoccupied with destroying the Kastan forces, giving his direct superior an opening to strike from the inky black. A jolt of satisfaction ran up his spine as he saw the previously organized pirate ships pounding and hammering against the Kastan formation buckle and break. Their formation shattered as they detected the torpedoes and realized something else was hunting them down. Simultaneously, he saw a small barrage of Staplian assaults surge forth with the 2 light destroyers leading the third group as their targets. "Think, Wyatt. What can we do? How do we kill as many pirates as possible while saving as many traitors as possible? I could set out the 5 available wedges on different attack vectors while we strike first from the front. But that would divide our forces too much against so many enemies. There's no time to prepare an ambush or trap. This is a straight-up battle." "Think, Wyatt," the heterochromatic-eyed man thought to himself, pressuring himself with the burden of coming up with a viable attack plan. A task made more difficult by the fact that he couldn't stop thinking about Raven Tomb. He'd learned more or less to predict how most blue bloods would act since he was young. Reading others wasn't that difficult either when he put any effort into it. But how does one predict a pirate lord? A no-name pirate was easy: murder, rape, or plunder. Those were their main objectives most of the time. But a man like Esket, that was an order of magnitude above the others, and he had all but given up trying to predict him after the first hour. How am I to predict the unpredictable? How am I to imitate his mindset? What is he after, really? If I were Raventomb, what would I do in his place? Those were some of the questions bouncing around his head for over 2 hours. It was frustrating, but also enlightening in a sick, twisted sense. The enemies of the principality were plentiful, and each had their own tactics and methods of operation, ranging from simplicity to the absurdly complex. He wasn't a strategist or some sort of military genius. He wasn't even particularly intelligent in any one field. What he was a good shooter, a great pilot, and a man who desired to live in peace above all else. Redford described him as paradoxical for some odd reason. Clara saw in him the soul of a true knight, though he disagreed with that vision. Cynthia looked at him as a friend, but in her eyes there was also a sense of gratitude and an expectation that he would achieve something. What exactly? He didn't have the faintest idea. Others, such as Galt, Jinsho, Feshik, his squad mates, Declan, Sabraska, the other head officers, and even the prince looked at him in different ways, but all of them saw something in him he genuinely couldn't comprehend. The rest of the crew aboard the Noir Navio had changed their view of him over time. It was subtle and disconcerting. Envy and resentment were still present, but they were shadows of themselves, replaced by fear and something else, something akin to respect, but not quite. Was it admiration? Awe? He didn't know. But he saw it whenever he traveled to the gymnasium, went to the mess hall for his meals, or walked around the ship. Being recognized for his talent felt good, a fact he couldn't deny. Everything else was mostly meaningless to him. Fame, power, recognition, and status higher than his station were never something he desired and were all but dumped on his lap at once. But he was Wyatt Staples, and he'd remain Wyatt Staples no matter what. He'd fight for the principality, his family, his apparently increasing number of friends, and perform his duty without fail and to the best of his abilities. Right now, though, his best had met a wall that he couldn't break or climb over. He'd seen glimpses of oddities, strange movements that didn't make much sense to him, but nothing more than that. His attention returned to the tactical display as he saw the Nornavio unleash volleys of railgun strikes. It wouldn't be long until the battle was joined in full. 30 seconds later, the first volley made impact, followed by 2 more. Lasers cut through unshielded ships with ease. He smiled when he saw pirate ships being disabled and destroyed as railgun rounds gutted them as if they were wriggling galas. Pirate small craft had moved to intercept the torpedoes. They had succeeded in some of the diversionary launches, but the commander had chosen to detonate the 3 heading toward the 4th group remotely. The detonations themselves caused minor damage, but the following EMP blast was bound to disable some fighters and drones and weaken shields. The remaining 2 torpedoes detonated, taking with them the 2 light destroyers. Cohesion among the pirates was faltering, but remained unbroken despite the rudeness of the assault. "There it is," Wyatt muttered, seeing his opening. Now the only question that remained was how to take maximum advantage of the situation. Before he could make a decision, Gregor spoke. "Sir, this is similar to Simulation 9. Close-range EMP blasts disturbed our sensors, forcing us to fly blind for an extended period of time. We could approach using the EMP as a cover and fire when we're right on top of them," the rotund man proposed, with a tone that betrayed his otherwise stoic, scholarly persona. "They wouldn't have time to react in time. Look, the Castons are as confused as they are, but are counterattacking. Undaj, what happened to your always-follow-the-doctrine attitude?" Leopold jibbed earnestly. Wyatt blinked, running the proposition in his mind. They were almost within combat range, but there was more than enough time as a predatory smile spread across his lips. "Raquel, Leopold, take Alpha and Beta wedges and attack from this vector," he ordered, sending them the coordinates that would take them below the original blast radius. "Everyone else on me!" "Noltar, Gregor, to my sides," he exclaimed as he took the upward vector, creating a pincer maneuver as they skimmed the original blast zone. The lingering effects of the EMP were still there, slightly disrupting his fighter's sensors and equipment, but it was getting weaker by the moment. The cover wouldn't last long, but thanks to Gregor's quick thinking, they could make quick use of it. The man who favored standard tactics and wasn't prone to deviating from accepted doctrine had recently seen the most change in his approach to combat. "Once we're clear, lock targets on active fighters. Launch to missile volleys! Leave the rest for later. Gregor, after the first volley is launched, lead Gamma Wedge. Join the assault next to Raquel and Leopold. Focus on destroying their bombers, and if you encounter gunships, kill them. Nultar, you'll be my wingman as we lead Delta Wedge. We're going to take down that light cruiser first, he ordered, activating his afterburners to reach battle faster before the window of surprise was lost to them. As ordered, once the 104 fighters cleared the zone, they were upon the fourth group as their advantage was suddenly stalled, and the Kasten formation was fighting back. A total of 208 missiles were fired, and it only took a few seconds for them to find their marks, destroying over 120 fighters and drones and heavily damaging another 30. The pirate small craft, disoriented by the EMP burst and taken by surprise by the unexpected reinforcements, were slow to train their weapons on the new objectives as they found themselves suddenly pressed on all angles. Raquel, Leopold, and Gregor, following Wyatt's orders, engaged the bewildered enemy while, simultaneously, Wyatt, Nultar, and Delta Wedge moved to the light destroyer. Omicron 1. Take your squadron and unlock your tactical mines in a tight group as you pass by. Activate maglocks after you detach. I want that thing reduced to a wreck, Wyatt ordered, as he took notice of a bomber and destroyed it with a railgun shot, followed by 3 drones and a damaged fighter with a series of coil gun bursts. Omicron squadron obeyed, detaching from the wedge formation as they passed alongside the light destroyer, its PD turrets either destroyed or firing against incoming missiles from the Kasten ships. The tactical mines were deployed and latched onto the ship's hull. 10 seconds later, they detonated. The light destroyer's superstructure was torn asunder as the explosion knocked it off course. Its engines died and its systems were disabled as it began to spin aimlessly across the void. Nu 1 and Zeta 1, move your squadrons to that corvette and the freighters around it. Bring them down, Wyatt ordered, marking the targeted ships. As he was about to give another order, he received a communication request from Raquel. Without hesitation, he accepted it. What is it, Raquel? Sir, we've received a communication request by, presumably, the Kasten fighter leader. He wishes to speak with our leader. That is you, sir. Should I dismiss the treacherous bastard? Wyatt blinked once before replying. No. Patch him through, he ordered, and with a "As you command, Lieutenant Commodore," from the bronze-skinned woman, the channel was open. With a firm voice, he began the conversation. What do you want? He asked without tact as he saw Nultar take out a gunship, and he destroyed 2 more fighters that were trying to get behind his squad mate. Sir, I don't know who you are, but I'm Second Lieutenant Furin Doshot. Please, assist us in dealing with these forsaken whoresons, the man at the other end pleaded, his voice filled with panic. They've been bleeding us dry since this damn battle began. We're getting annihilated, and you came in just in time to reinforce us. What be the name of he whom I have the pleasure of speaking? Wyatt was surprised by the initial outburst from the noble, though he composed quickly as his manners returned to him. I'm Lieutenant Commodore Wyatt Staples, Second Lieutenant. I stand with His Majesty the Prince under the banner of House Astor. I advise you, traitor, do not aim your... Wyatt Staples? The Wyatt Staples who raided the Gallant Venture? The Woodshaft Ace? Vanquisher of a lone wolf, the Roaring Thunder? That Wyatt Staples, the infamous wolfhound, the Wraith? The nobleman interrupted, half shouting, voice shaking. Yes? He asked, taken aback for a second before regaining his composure. Command us! The nobleman cried out immediately, pleading. Our leader was shot down as soon as those honorless bastards ambushed us. I stand as the highest-ranked pilot alive. In the name of my house, I shall bear the responsibility of the consequences my petition may carry. But please, allow us to join you in exterminating this plague from our system. Fall in, reorganize, and launch counteroffensives. Follow in our forces and push forth. No pirate shall be allowed to draw breath after today, Wyatt exclaimed. In his mind, the possibility of betrayal was high, but not before the pirates were destroyed or routed. As you command, Wolfhound, the man said, and the connection was killed. Wyatt frowned, but opened a link with every wedge leader, Lieutenant Commodore Donato and his squad mates. The Kasten fighters have requested to join us in battle. Do not target them and keep a safe distance. If any of them end up betraying us, you have permission to engage and destroy, he ordered, expecting refutations or objections, but instead received a series of affirmations, even though a pair were tentative. The Reaper's blade entered the fray, its PD turrets firing angrily as they provided additional support. At the same time, its railguns disabled another freighter, and a volley of missiles countered the barrage launched by one of their corvettes. As the battle continued, the Kaistan fighters recovered surprisingly quickly as the pirates' small craft now found themselves on the back foot, being forced to fight to their last. Drones performed suicidal attacks, trying to take any principality fighter with them, but they were all intercepted before they could do any real damage. Their subpar fighters showed their inferiority as they ran out of missiles and could fire their coil guns only sporadically to conserve ammunition, trusting their dwindling numbers to make up for their individual shortcomings. The bombers were hunted down after a group of them managed to reduce a destroyer to drifting debris alongside 2 frigates and a corvette that refused to stop firing until its reactors detonated, illuminating the void with a short-lived sphere of energy. Wyatt lost himself in the chaos of battle, his senses focused on striking down fighter after fighter with impudence. He weaved and swirled, confusing the bewildered pirates giving him chase. A gunship destroyed 2 Kaistan fighters, only to then be turned into a lifeless wreck by a railgun shot that tore apart its cockpit. As the battle continued, Wyatt couldn't help but compare the 2 groups now that those loyal to Duke Draymore and those loyal to the Prince were fighting side by side. It only took him a minute to see the difference between the 2 groups. His fighters worked together. Their efficiency had increased after Commander Redford refocused training into more team cohesion-focused simulations. Compared to them, the Kaistan fighters were pathetic. They worked in formations, the standard he'd learned since his days at the academy, but never questioned. Why would he? He was a mere plebeian. Greater men, talented, intelligent, cunning, masters of their fields, had developed those doctrines. They worked, didn't they? But now he saw the horrendous flaws. Namely, there was little to no cooperation beyond supporting a squadron leader. He was filled with disgust as he saw repeated accounts of the same practice he denounced on Hastrung, the so-called glory kills. Raptor fighters were superior to pirate fighters, but even now they couldn't let go of that idiotic, senseless thirst for increased renown and status. He wanted to shout at them. Nearly damn did so, but bit his tongue at the last second. If they want to be stupid, then I'll let them hunt for all the glory they want, he thought bitterly, as he took down 3 more drones and another gunship. Yet despite his disgust, he moved in to rescue a Kaistan fighter being chased by 2 pirate fighters, destroying them in short order. Ships continued to exchange fire. Shields had long since collapsed on both sides, and now armor was being torn asunder, hull rent by continuous kinetic strikes, and gaping holes created as plasma and missiles hammered it without end. There was no mercy or reprieve from either side. Only complete obliteration would dictate who the winner would be. Yet, as victory neared with every enemy dot that blinked away from his tactical display, a sense of unease filled his heart. What would he do if he were in Raven Tomb's place at that precise moment? What would Esket Adante's reaction be upon seeing half his fleet being compromised? Would he move to rescue his subjects? No, he wouldn't. Maybe they're his servants and he rules over them as their pirate lord, but they're not his subjects. A man like him holds no love for those under him. They are tools to be used and then discarded, Wyatt muttered to himself, firing his railgun for a 6th time to eliminate a pirate fighter, saving the life of another Kaistan pilot. Ruthlessness. A seasoned pirate is nothing if not a ruthless, selfish creature. A pirate lord has to be 10 times worse. What would I aim for in his place? He asked himself, eyes narrowing on his tactical display. With a thought, he expanded the view until it encompassed the 2nd Kaistan formation and Raven Tomb's group. I'd aim to balance the score, to destroy the enemy within my reach before facing other weakened foes. I'd seek to retain my upper hand. His eyes widened, realizing what was most likely to happen next. As if Raven Tomb wanted to prove him right, he saw the heavy cruiser unleash volley after volley of missiles heading straight toward Yasid's formation. However, the ship and its escorts themselves were changing course away from the Noir Navio and the 1st Kaistan formation, but closer to the 2nd Kaistan formation, which was, apparently, holding off the pirates to a greater degree. It wouldn't matter in the end. Whether Raven Tomb aimed to flee or to crush them, it would end in disaster. Yet, he was more than certain that he'd eliminate the 2nd formation before taking direct control of the battle himself with the rest of his fleet against whatever survived from Yasid's formation and the Nornavio. And his first move was to pin down his enemies and inflict whatever damage he could manage. With the priority access the commander had granted, he made a connection. Commander, he's trying to pin you to the battle. He'll either try to escape or move to eliminate the rest of the Kaistan fleet. He must be stopped before any of that happens. Go, Commander! We'll finish off these filthy pirates and rejoin you as soon as possible. For a moment, Wyatt feared the commander would dismiss his claim, but to his relief, the Noir Navio began to change course to give chase to Raven Tomb. Focusing on the immediate battle, the black-haired man weighed his options as his shields flared for a moment. In his distraction, 3 pirate fighters closed in for a kill. "Warning, shields at 30%, warned the onboard computer. Wyatt roared in defiance as he made a quick spin, turning to face his attackers. 2 missiles were launched as he opened fire on his first objective. Its shield, already near collapse, flickered out before being gutted by Kulgun rounds. The other 2 fighters tried to veer away, but the missiles caught up to them. The second fighter exploded as the missile impacted it, whilst the third survived at the cost of having a wing sheared off. Wyatt ended it with a short burst from his coil guns. Now, all he needed to do was figure out a way to neutralize the incoming missile barrage and retreat to support the Noir Navio as quickly as possible. But how? The battle was still ongoing. His first instinct was to deploy haywire or tactical mines and create a minefield to intercept the barrage. It would work, resulting in the elimination of a significant number of missiles, but he'd waste his limited supply of said mines, and he had a feeling he was going to need them direly soon enough. I could leave our fighters to deal with the remnants and take the Kaistan fighters instead, but I'm not willing to surround myself with so many traitors. There's bound to be at least a few glory-hunting blue bloods or greedy commoner pilots willing to risk it all in order to kill me, he scoffed at the idea. And I can't leave Yazid Kaistan's flagship alone. She could flee, or worse, order to turn their weapons on the Noir Navio. We're in their territory. Wyatt groaned in frustration, trying to find a suitable solution. His attention shifted to the Reaper's blade, and the thought of sending it to intercept the barrage and launch countermeasures crossed his mind. It wasn't ideal, but it was a good tactic, and it would leave him and every other fighter under his charge without direct support in the midst of Kaistan ships. Then another idea crossed his mind. If the problem was to ensure the survival of Yazid Kaistan at the very least, and prevent her from fleeing without risking the lives of his squad mates and the pilots under him, then the solution was simple. Requesting a connection with the Reaper's blade, it was granted a second later. Lieutenant Commodore Donato Lintar, this is Lieutenant Commodore Wyatt Staples. I hear you loud and clear, Lord Staples. Where do you need me? Donato asked enthusiastically. I need you to provide your support to the Kaistan fighters, while I and the rest of our fighters deal with the incoming missile barrage. Afterward, we'll move to reunite and reinforce the Noir Navio, aid in the suppression and elimination of every pirate vessel, and ensure that the traitor flagship is neither destroyed nor flees. May I count on your support? Wyatt asked at the end, phrasing his petition as not an order but as a request among equal-ranking officers, and showing just enough courtesy to avoid appearing insulting. In a twisted sense of irony, he didn't find that much different from having to vow his head to blue bloods and do his best to be subservient, complacent, and deferential. It shall be done, Lieutenant Commodore. I will ensure the wench yet lives to be handed over to Her Majesty. Loyalty is its own reward, replied Donato enthusiastically. My thanks, Lord Lintar, Wyatt replied before cutting the connection. Then, he opened one with the rest of his fellow pilots. It was only then that he noticed that from the starting 104, 8 had been destroyed at some point during the chaos of the battle. Clearing his throat, he began. Everyone disengage and form up on me. We'll spread out in a square formation directly in the path of the oncoming barrage. As it nears, we'll deploy our flares to scramble their sensors, creating a cloud in front of them. Not all will be destroyed or disabled, but what remains won't be anything their PD turrets can't handle. Once we deploy our flares, we'll make for the Noir Navio. The Reaper's blade shall remain behind to finish off the pirates alongside the Kaistan formation and prevent the loss of Captain Yazid Kaistan, he finished, his voice never faltering as he moved to disengage from the withering fight. There were barely any pirate small craft left as it was, and what remained were huddling in the protective bubbles of their remaining 8 ships, 5 freighters, 2 frigates, and 1 corvette. The rest were destroyed, crippled, or disabled. The Kaistans were not faring much better, as all but 1 destroyer had been killed or disabled. 6 frigates and 4 corvettes remained active. But most importantly, though presenting some minor damage, the line cruiser had been saved as well as approximately 160 of their fighters. Perhaps one or two more ships would be lost before the battle ended, and with the Reaper's blade in pristine condition, there would be no escape for the pirates. "Sir, are we to leave the disabled pirates for the traitors to claim as theirs? Will we allow our hard-earned glory fall into their hands so easily?" asked Lambda 1, one of the pilots who arrived with the Reaper's eye. "Let them have the easy kills, I say. It'll be the only salve they'll find for their wounded egos," added Leopold with a tiny, cruel laugh at the end. Wyatt closed his eyes tightly. A string of rather colorful words that would make Mr. Warlow proud and earn himself a terrible scolding from his mother burned in his throat, but he kept them inside. Instead, he let out a long, tired sigh and uttered 3 simple words. "Victory shall suffice." He needn't say more as all 96 fighters moved to intercept the barrage that was nearly upon Yazid's formation.